She was holding an ultrasound photo and a heart full of joy. He was holding divorce papers and someone else's future. And in the space between those two things, a love story died, a child was hidden, and a billionaire learned the most painful lesson of his life far too late. This is the story of Sasha Brooks. Remember her name. The night Sasha planned to change everything, Seoul was wrapped in rain. It hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse on the 47th floor, streaking the glass like tears that hadn't found a face yet. But Sasha wasn't thinking about the rain. She was setting the dining table with white candles, arranging rose petals with shaking hands, and whispering a prayer under her breath that God would let this moment be everything she imagined it could be. The small gift box sat at the center of the table. Inside it was an ultrasound photo, a tiny pair of yellow baby shoes she'd found at a boutique 2 streets over, and a folded note that simply read, "You're going to be a father." She'd rehearsed what she would say at least 40 times. She'd imagined his face, the way his eyes softened when he was caught off guard, the way the corner of his mouth would slowly pull into that rare smile she used to live for. She imagined him pulling her into his arms, kissing her forehead, and whispering that everything was going to be okay, that they were going to be okay. She heard the elevator pinching. The front door opened. Kang Ji-hoon walked in without looking at the candles, without looking at the table, without looking at her. He loosened his tie with one hand and dropped his briefcase on the chair near the door. His eyes, when they finally found hers, were the eyes of a stranger. "Sasha," he said, just her name, cold and flat like a door closing. "Ji-hoon." She smiled carefully. "I made dinner. I have something I need to tell you. Something important. Something that's going to—" He moved to the table, but not toward the gift box. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. He set it down on the table between the rose petals and the candlelight. Sasha stared at it. "What is that?" "Divorce papers," he said. "I need you to sign them." The candles kept burning. The rain kept falling. And Sasha Brooks stood in the middle of her own carefully built dream and felt the floor dissolve beneath her feet. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't beg. She just looked at the envelope, and then she looked at the man she had loved for 6 years, and she asked him one question. Why? To understand why that question mattered so much, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the end, the real beginning. The part nobody talks about when they tell stories about billionaires. 6 years earlier, Kang Ji-hoon was not a billionaire. He was a 28-year-old man with a laptop, a failing startup, and a level of pride that made it nearly impossible for him to ask for help. He had an idea, a logistics technology platform that could revolutionize supply chain management across Southeast Asia. But no funding, no connections, and no one who believed in him. Sasha Brooks was 26. She was a financial analyst with a sharp mind and a warm heart, working at an investment firm in Seoul on a 2-year contract. She was one of the very few black women in her building, and she had learned early to work twice as hard and take up exactly the right amount of space. She met Ji-hoon at a networking event. He spilled his drink on her blazer. He apologized badly. She laughed anyway. Within 3 months, they were inseparable. She helped him restructure his pitch deck. She stayed up until 2 in the morning helping him rehearse presentations. When his first round of funding fell through, and he sat on the kitchen floor of his small apartment and said nothing for an hour, it was Sasha who sat beside him on that floor, shoulder to shoulder, until he was ready to speak again. "They don't believe in you yet," she told him that night. "I do. That's enough for now. Let's get back up." She lent him money from her own savings, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. She cooked. She encouraged. She defended him at dinner parties where Korean socialites raised their eyebrows at the sight of them together and made comments just loud enough to be heard. What exactly does she bring to this table? One woman asked at a company dinner, looking straight at Sasha with a polished smile. Sasha had smiled back and said, "More than you'll ever know." Ji-hoon had laughed that night on the way home and squeezed her hand and said, "I don't deserve you." She had believed him. She just hadn't understood back then that he meant it differently than she thought. The company grew. The funding came. The platform launched. And within 18 months, it was dominating markets across 5 countries. Ji-hoon went from a struggling entrepreneur to the face of a billion-dollar enterprise. Profiles in Forbes Asia, speaking invitations, a penthouse in Gangnam, tailored suits, a different world entirely. And somewhere in that rise, Sasha stopped being the woman who built him up and became, instead, a detail he'd forgotten to update. Her name was Yoona Lee. She was everything that Seoul's elite considered appropriate. Tall, polished, from a wealthy family with deep corporate connections, and relentlessly focused on Ji-hoon's orbit the moment his company crossed the billion-dollar mark. She joined the executive team as head of strategic partnerships and made it her personal mission to be in every room Ji-hoon was in. Sasha noticed, the way women always notice, not in a dramatic single moment, but in 100 small ones. The way Ji-hoon's phone would light up at 11 at night, and he'd take it to another room. The faint trace of perfume on a collar that wasn't hers. The coldness that arrived gradually, like a season changing, until she woke up one morning and realized winter had come, and no one had told her. She confronted him once, calmly. She sat across from him at the breakfast table and said, "Is something going on between you and Yoona?" Ji-hoon didn't even look up from his phone. "Don't start this." "I'm not starting anything. I'm asking a direct question." "Yoona is a colleague. You're being insecure." "Ji-hoon, I'm not insecure. I'm observant. There's a difference." He stood up, buttoned his jacket and said, "I don't have time for this today," and left. Sasha sat at the breakfast table alone for a long time after that. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She'd taken the test 3 times because she didn't trust the first result. Each time, the same answer. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the cool wall and pressed both hands over her stomach and cried. But not from sadness. From something overwhelming and enormous and terrifying and bright all at the same time. This was a new thing. This was something that was hers. Something real. She decided to tell him properly, with love, with hope. Maybe, she thought, and she hated herself a little for needing to think it. Maybe this would bring them back to each other. She didn't know he'd already made his decision. "Why?" she had asked him, standing in the candlelight. Ji-hoon looked at her for a moment, and something moved behind his eyes. Something that might have been guilt, or might have been impatience. And then it was gone. "Because this isn't working," he said. "It hasn't been working for a long time." "And Yoona?" Sasha's voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. "Does she factor into this not working?" He paused. "I'm not going to lie to you. I have feelings for her." "You have feelings for her," Sasha repeated slowly. "After everything." She stopped. She breathed. "After everything I did for you, Ji-hoon. After every night I stayed up beside you. After every time I defended you, funded you, believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. I know what you did," he said. "I'm grateful." "You're grateful?" The word came out with a quiet bitterness she couldn't hold back. "That's what I am to you. A debt you're grateful for." "Sasha, don't." She held up one hand. "Don't say my name like that." Behind her back, hidden in her left hand, she held the ultrasound photo. She looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw it with devastating clarity. He was not going to choose her. Not tonight. Not if she told him. He would not suddenly remember who she was to him because of a photograph. He would turn this into something to negotiate, something complicated, something that served him. And her child, deserved better than to be a bargaining chip. She stepped forward. She picked up the pen from beside, the envelope, and she signed the divorce papers. Ji-hoon blinked. He had expected tears. He had expected pleading. He had clearly prepared himself for a fight. Instead, she signed with a calm hand, capped the pen, and set it down gently. "There," she said. "Sasha, you don't have to." "No, I don't have to," she said. "I want to." "You want Yuna, Ji-hoon. Have her." She turned away from him and walked toward the bedroom. At the doorway, she stopped without turning around. "I hope she makes you happy. I genuinely do. Because you clearly have no idea what you're walking away from." He didn't follow her. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, pressed the ultrasound photo to her chest, and cried without making a single sound so he wouldn't hear her. Before sunrise, she was gone, packed what she could carry, left no note, turned off her phone, and walked out of that penthouse like someone who had already decided who she was going to be on the other side of this. Ji-hoon woke to an empty apartment, a cold bed, and her half of the closet stripped bare. He looked at the space for a moment, then made coffee and went to work. What came next for Sasha was not a movie montage of triumph. It was hard. It was lonely. It was the kind of hard that grinds you down and asks you every single day if you're sure about the choices you've made. She moved to a modest apartment in a city where no one knew her name or her story. She worked 2 jobs, a remote financial consulting position and an evening shift at a clothing boutique, while the pregnancy progressed. She ate well because she refused to let her circumstances touch her child. She slept when she could. She cried when she needed to. She kept going because stopping was not something she was willing to do. The night she went into labor, she was alone. She called a cab. She checked herself in. She held her own hand through the hardest hours, and when the nurse placed a small, warm, perfect boy on her chest, Sasha Brooks looked at his face and felt everything, all the grief, all the humiliation, all the exhaustion, dissolve into something pure and absolute. "Hi," she whispered. "I'm your mom, and I promise you, I am going to be enough." She named him Eli G. Brooks, though she kept that middle name to herself for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Something in her couldn't fully erase his father from the child's identity, even if she could erase him from their lives. The early years were difficult in ways she hadn't anticipated. The bone-deep fatigue of single parenthood, the financial tightening, the social isolation that comes from pouring everything into a baby when you have no family nearby. But Sasha was sharp, and she was disciplined. And when Eli turned 1 and she started having fragments of time to think again, she began building. She had always had an eye for fashion, knew quality fabrics, understood what women actually wanted to wear versus what brands told them to want. She started small, an Instagram page, then a Shopify store, curating pieces from independent designers and styling them in ways that felt real. She reinvested every small profit. She worked on it in Eli's nap times and after his bedtime and on lunch breaks. By the time Eli turned 3, Sasha's brand had 10,000 followers. By the time he turned 5, it had 250,000. By the time he started school, Sasha Brooks was running a legitimate, growing fashion business with a team of 4 and a reputation for being exactly the kind of brand that made women feel seen. She had not spoken to Kang Ji-hoon once. On the other side of the world, the man who had handed her divorce papers was learning, slowly and painfully, what it meant to have chosen wrong. Yuna Lee was extraordinary at wanting things. She was considerably less extraordinary at sustaining them once she had them. The relationship with Ji-hoon that had seemed so compelling in the shadows of an affair became, in the daylight of an actual partnership, something far less romantic. Yuna wanted the lifestyle, the status, the access to his world. She was not interested in the parts of Ji-hoon that were difficult, the long work hours, the emotional unavailability, the moments of self-doubt he occasionally let surface. Within a year, she had found someone with more social currency and fewer complications. She left cleanly, and without much apparent grief. Ji-hoon stood in his penthouse, the same one Sasha had walked out of, and felt the silence differently than he had before. This silence wasn't the absence of someone he'd dismissed. This was the absence of someone he'd chosen, and it told him something about himself that was not easy to sit with. Then the corporate problems began. An internal audit revealed financial irregularities that traced back to a partnership Yuna had overseen, and Ji-hoon had rubber-stamped without sufficient scrutiny. 3 major investors pulled out within 60 days. The board called emergency meetings. The press, which had celebrated him for years, sharpened its knives. Ji-hoon worked 18-hour days trying to stabilize what he'd built, and every night he came home to nothing but the sound of rain against glass and his own thoughts, which were growing increasingly unkind to him. It was during a late-night session of sorting through old documents, financial records, contracts, things that needed organizing for the legal proceedings, that he found it. A folder he didn't remember filing. Inside it, a piece of paper he didn't remember keeping. A letter from a medical clinic, addressed to Sasha, dated 5 days before the divorce. Congratulations on your pregnancy. As discussed in your appointment, you are currently 8 weeks along. Please find attached your first ultrasound results and your scheduled follow-up care plan. Ji-hoon read it 3 times. The date, the timing, the appointment she'd gone to alone. He thought about that night, the candles, the gift box he hadn't opened, the way she'd held one hand behind her back when she signed the papers. He had assumed it was grief, a dramatic gesture. It hadn't been grief. She had been holding the proof that she was carrying his child, and she had signed those papers anyway, packed her bags before sunrise, disappeared, and never told him. The folder dropped from his hands. Ji-hoon Kang, billionaire CEO, the man who had built an empire from a laptop and a dream that a woman named Sasha Brooks had believed in before anyone else, sat down on his office floor and for the first time in longer than he could remember, cried. He hired investigators within the week. It was not a fast process. Sasha had been careful, not in a calculating, vindictive way, but in the way of someone who had genuinely built a new life and had no reason to stay connected to the old one. She'd changed her number, moved twice. The business was registered under a slightly different brand name than her personal one. But Sasha Brooks was not invisible. She was, in fact, becoming increasingly visible. Her business had press features. Her face appeared in a podcast interview. And Ji-hoon, watching that interview on his laptop at midnight, felt something shift inside him like a fault line. She looked good. Not just physically, though she did, radiantly, but in the way of someone who had come through fire and built something from the ashes. She laughed easily in the interview. She talked about her son with a warmth that reached through the screen. She did not mention Ji-hoon's name, not once. How do you balance building a business with being a single mother? The interviewer asked. Sasha smiled and said, You just decide that both matter. You don't get the luxury of using one as an excuse to neglect the other. Eli makes me more focused, not less, because he's watching me, and what I do is what he learns is possible. Ji-hoon paused the video on her face. He didn't sleep that night. The investigators found her 4 months after he started the search. A school event, Parents' Day at Eli's primary school, in a city 300 kilometers from Seoul. Ji-hoon drove himself. He didn't want anyone else there for this. He stood at the edge of the school courtyard, uncertain for the first time in years about what to do with his hands, his face, his words. And then he saw her. Sasha, in a sunflower yellow dress, kneeling down to adjust the collar of a small boy's shirt. The boy turned around. Ji-hoon stopped breathing. The boy's face was Sasha's bone structure, Sasha's smile, Sasha's light. But his eyes, dark, slightly narrowed at the corners, intense and bright all at once, were his own eyes looking back at him from a small stranger's face. His son didn't know he existed. His son was standing 20 meters away from him, laughing at something his mother had said, entirely whole and entirely loved, and had never once needed him. Ji-hoon had to sit down. He waited until the event was over, until the other parents had filed out and Eli had run ahead to the car, chattering about something he'd made in art class. Then he stepped into Sasha's path. She saw him and went perfectly still. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them carried 6 years of everything: love, sacrifice, betrayal, silence. "Sasha," he said. "Ji-hoon." Her voice was calm, contained, the kind of calm that takes enormous effort to maintain. "I know I have no right to be here." "You're right," she said simply. "You don't." "I found the letter," he said. "From the clinic. I found it in the documents from the apartment. He stopped. He pressed his mouth together. "I know about the baby." Something shifted in her expression. Not shock. She had known, somewhere, that this day would eventually arrive. She looked at him steadily. "His name is Eli. He's 5 years old. He's the best person I've ever met in my life." "Sasha, don't." Her voice cracked just slightly, and she steadied it again immediately. "Don't stand in front of me like you just made a small mistake. You handed me divorce papers on the night I was going to tell you we were having a child. You told me you wanted another woman. You dismissed 6 years of my love like it was an inconvenience. And then you went on with your life." "I know," he said. His voice was low, undone. "I know what I did." "Do you?" She tilted her head. "Because knowing what you did and understanding what you did are very different things." "I was a coward," he said. "I was cold, and I was selfish, and I told myself that what I had with Yuna was something it wasn't. I convinced myself you'd be fine, because I didn't want to do the work of thinking about what I was actually destroying." He exhaled hard. "I was wrong. I was catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. And I know that saying it doesn't undo any of it." Sasha was quiet for a moment. Down the path, Eli's voice floated back to her, singing something to himself at the car. "I loved you when you had nothing," she said finally. "I was there on that kitchen floor with you, when you thought the dream was over. I gave you everything I had, my time, my money, my belief in you. And then when you had everything," she paused, "you looked at me and decided I wasn't enough for your new world." "You were always enough," he said, and his voice broke on the word. "That was never about you not being enough. That was about me not being enough. Not being worthy of what you gave me. I didn't know what to do with someone who loved me like that, so I destroyed it instead." Tears stood in his eyes. He didn't try to hide them. "Sasha, please. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. He exhaled. "Can I meet him? Can I? Please. Can I know my son?" Sasha looked at him for a long time. Then she turned and called down the path. "Eli, come here for a minute." The small boy came running, sneakers slapping the pavement, art project clutched in his hands, curious eyes sweeping between his mother and the tall stranger standing in front of her. "Eli," Sasha said gently, "this is Ji-hoon. He's someone your mama used to know." Eli looked up at Ji-hoon with those mirror eyes and said, with the complete unself-consciousness of a 5-year-old, "You're very tall. Do you play basketball?" Ji-hoon laughed, a real laugh, sudden and startled out of him, and crouched down to Eli's eye level. His voice came out rough and a little broken and very, very gentle. "No, but I've always wanted to learn." Eli considered this seriously. "I can teach you," he said. "I'm pretty good." Ji-hoon looked up at Sasha with something in his face that was beyond words. She looked back at him without flinching, without softening, without cruelty. Just truth, steady, and clear. What followed was not a fairy tale reconciliation. Life is not a fairy tale, and Sasha Brooks was not a woman who traded her earned wholeness for the comfort of an easy ending. Ji-hoon was allowed into Eli's life slowly, carefully, on terms that Sasha set and held. He showed up. Every scheduled visit, he was early. Every birthday, every school play, every small, ordinary Saturday, he was there. He did not push Sasha for more than she was willing to give. He did not try to negotiate his way back into her life with money or gestures or the kind of grand romantic performance that looks like love, but is actually ego. He just showed up and did the work of being a father to a child who had not asked for him, but turned out, with the forgiving openness of children, to be entirely willing to let him in. Eli called him by his name for a long time. Then one afternoon, without announcement or ceremony, he called him Appa, Dad. And Ji-hoon had to excuse himself to the bathroom and stand there for 3 minutes before he could trust his own face again. Sasha watched all of it. She felt all of it. She was not made of stone, but she was made of something stronger than longing. One evening, when Eli was asleep and Ji-hoon was preparing to leave, he paused at the door and turned to her with that quiet, careful look she had come to recognize. The one that meant he was about to say something honest rather than strategic. "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "I forgave you a long time ago, Ji-hoon." His face shifted with relief, and then she continued. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back." She held his gaze steadily. "What we had is gone. I'm not the same woman you married, and I don't want to be. I built something from the wreckage you left me in, and I'm proud of it. Eli is proud of it. We are okay. I am okay. And the best thing you can do for us now is be a good father. That's all I need from you." He nodded slowly. He understood, and she believed that he did. He walked out the door into the night, and Sasha stood at the window and watched him go. She felt no bitterness, no triumph, no grief, just a quiet, earned peace, the kind that doesn't come from things working out the way you planned, but from discovering that you are more than capable of surviving the plan falling apart. Down the hall, Eli slept soundly, dreaming in the safety of a home his mother had built from nothing but her own 2 hands and an absolute refusal to stop. And for the rest of his life, Kang Ji-hoon would carry the weight of what he had thrown away, not as punishment, but as truth. The greatest love he had ever known was the one he had held in his hands and chosen to release. And no amount of money, no corporate success, no second chance would ever fully close that particular wound. Some lessons cost everything. He had paid in full. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Sasha's strength and Ji-hoon's regret, you are exactly who this channel was made for. Hit that like button right now, because it tells us you want more stories that make you feel something real. Subscribe if you haven't already. We drop new stories every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. And drop a comment below. Did Sasha make the right call? Should she have taken him back? The comments on this one are going to be something else. We will see you in the next story.